Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. For those listening right now, we're going to wait a few more minutes to start, but I'll share some meeting procedures while we wait for a few more people to tune in. We expect this meeting to be about 20 minutes, so we hope it won't take up too much of your time tonight. And for those who are watching, thank you. We are appreciative of everyone who's been able to tune in and watch. For those familiar with our usual consultation process, we really love the ability to meet people in person in their communities, usually in their closest arena or school, and to really sit down one-on-one and show you the maps for your specific property and talk about the potential hazards in your area and really talk to you about where you've seen flooding and erosion on your property and really dig into what these new maps might mean for you. Obviously, we're not able to do that this year, so we are hosting this meeting online. For questions that you might have tonight during the presentation, we have two options for you. Your first option is to drop us a message in the video chat, and either someone from our team will respond to you and link you up with the information you need, or we'll try and answer your questions at the end of our presentation. The other option, which is more personal, is to connect with us directly after the presentation. On our project webpage and at the end of our presentation, we'll include a reservation link where you can fill out a request to meet with one of our team members over the next 2 weeks. Meetings can be done and can take place during the weekday or at night and can be done in person with appropriate COVID-19 precautions in place, or by phone, or through an online meeting like this where we can digitally zoom in and zoom out on your specific property so that we can best answer your questions as it relates to your property. This is something we always like to do when we're sharing draft maps with the public, because it really helps us get you all of the information that you're going to need to make good, informed decisions on your property. For logistic purposes tonight, we have two presenters from the South Nation Conservation Authority, myself, John Messman, and I'm joined by my colleague, Allison McDonald. And we'll be delivering our presentation by sharing our screens virtually in Microsoft Teams and broadcasting to our YouTube channel. I say this because we are broadcasting the meeting, and there may be up to about a minute of lag time for us to see your messages in the chat. I also want to draw your attention while I have it to the video description. There is a website link that will direct you back to the South Nation website at nation.on.ca. On this website, you'll see additional project details, including copies of the draft maps, and also a presentation package. You're welcome to download this if you're interested, but we will go through each of those slides in our presentation on video. If you have any internet connectivity issues, you're also welcome to download that slide deck and follow along with our audio, or you're welcome to come back to the project page later and rewatch this meeting. You'll also see some additional resources posted to this webpage, including some extra fact sheets and guides that further explain how floodplain maps are created, how these areas are regulated, and how permitting works, as well as some additional information on how to prepare for a potential flood or how to clean up after a flood, including some tips on how to manage your well and septic system if you're on private services. This website, presentation, draft maps, and resources are also all available in French online. Ce site est également disponible en français. Il suffit de cliquer sur l'onglet français en haut de la page de notre site web et vous pourrez également accéder à toutes ces informations en français. Pour sauver du temps ce soir, nous allons partager uniquement la présentation en anglais dans cette vidéo. Cependant, nous avons téléchargé une présentation en français avec quelques notes si vous êtes intéressé à suivre en français. Vous pouvez cliquer sur la description de cette vidéo, cliquer sur le lien qui vous mènera à notre site web, cliquer sur la version en français et télécharger les notes de la présentation en français. De plus, si vous avez des questions par la suite ou si vous souhaitez de nous parler directement en français, nous pouvons facilement mettre en place un moment de parler. And with that, just looking at the time, I think we'll get started here. So welcome everyone to our public meeting for updated natural hazard mapping for Clarence Creek in the city of Clarence, Rockland. A quick note, we do have other public meetings going on this week for other streams in our region. However, this meeting is specific to the Clarence Creek area. Everyone who owns property within or adjacent to the area in our draft maps would have received a letter from us a few weeks ago with an invitation to attend this meeting or speak directly with our staff. The draft maps were also included with these letters, And if you didn't receive a letter and are on this call, you're also still welcome to watch, participate, and ask any questions you see fit. I'm going to kick off our meeting tonight with a few comments about our organization, the South Nation Conservation Authority, just to give you a bit of an overview on who we are and what we do, so you can better understand why we were contracted by our municipal partners to complete these sorts of projects and floodplain mapping updates. Once I'm done, I'll pass the hot seat over to my colleague Allison to explain a bit about natural hazards, why and how we map them, and how we work with property owners and municipalities to ensure that future construction projects in and near these areas are reviewed and approved so that they can protect people and property and support good and safe development activities. We'll also end the presentation by showing some of the draft maps on the screen and walk you through a few examples that will hopefully answer some of the questions that you might have. I'll start with a quick map of our watershed jurisdiction on the screen. We are one of Ontario's 36 conservation authorities, and we operate under provincial legislation called the Conservation Authorities Act. But we also deliver other work through agreements with provincial ministries and our own municipalities to deliver environmental services through other pieces of legislation, like the Clean Water Act, among others. In our region in Eastern Ontario, we work for 16 different municipalities, including the city of Clarence, Rockland, and our jurisdiction is around the South Nation River and its tributaries, which begin near their headwaters in Brockville, down near the St. Lawrence River, and end up near Plantagenet, where the river empties into the Ottawa River. You'll also notice in the map that our jurisdiction extends to both the St. Lawrence and Ottawa rivers. These are recent developments over the last few years where we've extended our jurisdiction to these regions at the request of our municipalities to help better deliver environmental services, especially floodplain mapping and flood forecasting in these areas. And this is, of course, in response to some of the significant and historic events that we've seen in 2017 and 2019 in these areas. And though we've been doing flood forecasting along the Ottawa River with other agencies over the last few years, we've only officially extended our jurisdiction in Clarence Rockland early in 2020 this year. Which means that though we work as watershed managers to deliver environmental services for our municipalities, you can expect that one of the most important parts of our jobs is to protect people and property from natural hazards like flooding, erosion, and landslides. Through this, we do deliver several services on behalf of our municipalities, including septic inspections, drinking water source protection, while also operating 8 different dams and other water control structures, and managing a flood forecasting program to predict and respond to flood events. The landslide photo we included in this slide is from the area between Castleman and Lemieux, and rather the former village of Lemieux, where significant erosion occurs due to the presence of laid clay soil in that area. The clay soil there can turn from solid to liquid in a matter of seconds, and that area has been susceptible to large-scale landslides for centuries and has really seen significant, events in the 70s and 90s. This hazard area, for example, was mapped by us and is regulated by us to limit development in that area. In the 90s, we also worked to relocate the former village of Lemieux, and we were successful in moving all of these former village residents and their homes just 1 year before the landslide occurred in the photo on the screen. Like the landslide areas, our staff also work to map floodplains and erosion hazards in other areas identified by our municipalities with increased development pressure to ensure that whatever new buildings are approved are being built in the safest way possible. While our staff review development files and proposals, and Allison's going to share some examples in just a bit, we're not always looking to restrict development like we would in the Castleman to Lemieux area. Our staff are working with the property owner, developer, and municipality to find ways to approve projects when it's safe by recommending things like flood-proofing measures, different locations for buildings, and safe construction techniques. And though we want to provide support for good construction projects, we do have to be clear in saying that this is and can be very circumstantial. There's not always a one-size-fits-all approach to approvals, and this is why permission is required from the Conservation Authority before work can proceed. There will be instances where what is proposed to be built really just would not be safe, and there are many scenarios where proposals might be able to proceed or may need to be altered before they can proceed. We want to be able to approve development that's going to protect you and also your investment, your property, and the buildings you construct on them. We also need to consider how the alteration of your shoreline or your construction project might impact your neighbors and their properties. We also do complete environmental monitoring programs that help us report on watershed conditions and environmental health. And there are reports on our website that you're welcome to review. I mention this because our planning and regulation team also use this data to make informed decisions when reviewing development proposals. When we know that an area is in poor environmental health, for example, we also do our best to work with our municipalities and affected property owners to help improve the environment through restoration projects. On this, I do want to share a reminder. Though we're very proud of the restoration work that we do every year, we do rely on fundraising and financial project partnerships to help fund this work. As an example, we did work with a few different community funders a few years ago to help plant more trees on private property along the Clarence Creek and Cobbs Lake Creek's areas in 2017 and 2018. There's always, and certainly there's more work to be done, but we did want to give a shout out and say that we are grateful for the community supports for some of those projects in recent years. We also deliver a number of different environmental stewardship programs through agreements with our counties and municipalities, including things like roadside tree programs, water quality improvement programs for farmers that offer cost share funding for projects that help improve water quality. And we also have an ash tree replacement program in the city of Ottawa. And probably our most important program being our tree planting program, which is often what people know us most for. And we've had really great uptake and use of our tree planting programs in Clarence Rockland. Our tree planting program is now funded by the federal government and the private property owners that participate. And we're also able to offer a variety of services, including site prep, tending, spraying, and tree planting for as low as 20 cents per conifer and 50 cents per deciduous trees. Of course, should you have questions, please feel free to give us a call at any time, as we are hoping to plant a record number of trees next year, that being 200,000. And as of today, we have about 175,000 reserves. So while we're closing in on our goal, we still have a lot more work to do. So if anyone on the call is interested, definitely please feel free to reach out and let us know. We'd love to chat. A final slide for our overview. We wanted to mention that we are a public land trust and we work to protect significant natural spaces in Eastern Ontario. And we've been acquiring land since 1970 through partial purchase and donation. Many of these properties were also acquired for flood mitigation, including areas to construct berms and dikes in some areas, which were required to keep them from being developed, like areas within the Castleman-Tullamew potential retrogressive landslide area. We also own about 13,000 acres of forested land, and we operate about 15 different day-use parks that we call conservation areas. And I also do want to mention that most of our parks are actually on land that was donated to us by people to help protect and conserve their family's natural legacies. For more information, feel free to check out our land donation page on our website. A space is probably not too far from our listeners is the Jessops Falls Conservation Area near Plantagenet, which is open seasonally and provides a pretty great spot for hiking, picnic, fishing, and free boating access to the South Nation River. And with that, I will pass off the microphone virtually off to Allison so she can start us off on our natural hazard map updates. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So I'm Allison McDonald and I work with our approvals team. We do planning, regulations. We also look after some other building code stuff. And generally what our team tries to do is keep people, development, and property safe from natural hazards. So what are natural hazards when we talk about them? The two we're talking about tonight are floodplain and erosion hazards. And to be specific, floodplains are low-lying areas near watercourses that are naturally subject to flooding. There's an example on the side there from Winchester Springs where there was flooding occurring in 2017. The other hazard we look at when we're looking at water bodies is erosion hazards. And that's areas that can potentially regress and retreat due to different types of factors. It could be geologic, could be seismic, could be water, could be things that people are doing on the land, but essentially when the land tends to retreat away and move back. So people see it as essentially losing portions of their property. And that's depicted in the slide or in the photo to the side at another site within our watershed in Castleman in 2017. So these are the two natural hazards that we generally talk about and that we're here to talk about tonight. So why do we want to map these? Why do we want to know where these are? Well, essentially, we do this on behalf of our municipalities to ensure that all development in their area is safe and sustainable. We really want to protect people and their property and their investments from being susceptible to flooding or erosion. And we update our maps that we have for hazards based on where local municipalities identify priorities and where the province or federal government provides funds. And essentially, it's something that we do on a regular basis to make sure that we know where these hazards are and that people who live in these areas are also aware of where these hazards are. So what would cause us to conduct a hazard mapping project like the one for Clarence Creek? Generally, it's based on development pressure. So we identify areas where we think there will be more development in the future, where people may be looking to locate for their homes, for their businesses, for industrial or commercial development. So we look at the areas that face increased development pressure, but we also look at existing urban areas where there is development, but there's no natural hazard mapping existing. So we want to take a look at areas where in the past people have already located their homes, but there was no information done at the time. Sometimes it's out of date. Sometimes it's based on older modeling techniques, but generally we're just looking to make sure that where people tend to want to live or build or invest money, that they have the information they need to make those decisions in a smart way. So we have a two sort of pronged approach when we look at mapping these hazards. We use both computer models and on the ground information. So to start, we take a look at the land use in the area. We have great topography. We have something called LiDAR that allows us to see sort of a picture of the landscape. We look at the actual flows of water, the types of precipitation or rain and snow events that are occurring. We have staff, as you can see in the photo to the left, going out and doing actual surveys. They collect information on the infrastructure, so things like culverts or bridges. We use our LiDAR, as I mentioned, to give us really great detailed topographical information. So it's a great tool that's available to us now. And then we put all that data into a computer model, which essentially creates a virtual stream flow based on a precipitation event. We take that digital model and we have it peer reviewed both by our engineers and other engineers external to our organization to finalize the maps, which are the maps that you're seeing tonight. So what happens in these natural hazard areas? We apply what we call a permit system. And it means essentially that anytime people want to develop inside one of these areas, they have to come to our office and have a chat about what they want to do. And as John mentioned, the purpose of that is to make sure that, that people are aware of what the hazard is, where it is on the property, and whether or not what they want to build or do makes sense given the information. And sometimes there are ways to make a project safer. Sometimes there's a way to move it so it's not located in the hazard. Generally, the idea is to keep things out of an area where they might be flooded or where they might erode away. So the permit from the Conservation Authority gives you some benefits. It allows you steps to take to make sure your project's safe. It protects people and property, and it makes sure that the development is also safe for the environment. And another important point that John made is if a property owner is looking to do work on their property, it makes sure that all those, the safety for the person, the safety for the environment is applied to benefit the neighbors as well. So what someone does on their property in a floodplain could have effects upstream and downstream. And that's something that we take a look at as well.
So we did mail everyone the full draft maps, but we've broken them up into a few sections on our presentation tonight, just so you can see the affected area better on the screen. And of course, if there are any questions that come through the comment section, it'll give us a good chance to use these photos to provide some good answers. And while the map is up, I do want to share some project timeline rather, for those that are interested. As some of you may have already spoken or met with our staff during the project, many of you would have also received letters from us at the beginning of the project to help provide us with access to locations so that we could survey portions of the stream or some of the different culverts or infrastructure in the area to support our model. And in looking at the comment bar as well, if you'd like to drop us any questions while we scroll through the maps, please feel free, and we'll try and come back to these later with some answers. For properties where we needed to survey the streams or the infrastructure, those letters went out in May of 2018, so a little while ago. And most of the surveying which occurred on the ground was done by our staff or contractors in June of 2018. But there were some spot surveys that were completed after the models were drafted, just so staff could go back out and verify some of those model outputs. The majority of the computer modeling and digital work was done in the summer and fall of 2018 and in the spring of 2019, with a new model update done early this year to account for the erosion hazard in some of these areas. There were also some modeling adjustments made, of course, after the peer review and as new information was explored this year. In total in this area, there were about 6 different structures that were surveyed to help complete that digital model, and permission to access private property was granted by all of the property owners we reached out to. Often when we are asked by municipalities to update these maps, there are sometimes areas with old dated paper maps and sometimes areas without any mapping at all, which was the case for the updates to some of the mapping we spoke about at our last public meeting on Tuesday for Finley Creek in the city of Ottawa. We had a bit of both. In this particular area, though, we did not have any previous mapping in place. And of course, as Allison mentioned, the main reason that this area was identified by the county and the municipality was because of the increased development pressure in this area, which is already noticeable, of course, at the top portion of the creek. And then another factor, as you can likely expect, is the significant impact on the Ottawa River shoreline from the recent flood events that are really just a stone's throw away. We all know that homes will continue to be built here, and that's why we want to ensure that any new builds are going to be safe for the people that live there, and of course for the property that they're going to own. I will note that at the time when we were asked to complete this work, that parts of this area were not under our CA jurisdiction. However, the updated jurisdiction expansion that I mentioned from this year includes, or rather adds, the rest of the area within the city of Clarence Rockland in our CA jurisdiction. So for all intensive purposes, you can basically, as of this year, now expect that we have Conservation Authority jurisdiction when it comes to managing natural hazards within this municipality, which is another reason why we're hosting these public engagement sessions, as we will be taking these maps to our board of directors for review and approval so that we can use them for our regulations programs. Which means, again, as Allison touched on, that any construction or proposed development within the floodplain or erosion hazard will require permission from us before it can proceed. We really don't want to see the municipality or property owners in a situation like what we've seen along the Ottawa River in recent flood events. So there's a couple maps I'll show you. This one is the one that was mailed out to you. It gives you an idea or extent of the hazard. The blue line is the creek, the yellow line is the flood hazard area, and then that pink or purple line that goes around it is the regulated area. This is the area where a regulation is going to apply. And that area is going to include the greatest of whatever hazard exists. So that being floodplain or erosion and a small 15-meter buffer to provide access to that area. I also want to show you, there's 2 areas on this map. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor just up here. You can see that. This is actually for Blake Creek. It's a very small creek, but it's a tributary to Clarence Creek. And this area was also mapped. You can see while the creek is here, we've got a pretty large flood hazard line around this area surrounded by that regulation line. So Blake Creek is also included in the study area. And then another one, here's Pelon Creek, which is actually, if you go back to the first slide, you can see that over here, a small area as well. So Pelon Creek was also included in this area. And this is a good example. If you look closely, obviously here you can see the flood hazard line, you see the regulation line. We didn't denote the erosion hazard on this map, but you can expect, especially in areas like this, if you see the meandering belt, the meandering creek running through here, you see the flood or the 100-year flood line that Allison's going to talk about, and then you see this larger gap here, which is likely more than 15 meters. And the reason for that larger regulation limit is because there is an erosion concern here, which you can expect if you're familiar with the area. And I'll pass it back over to Allison to give us a few examples, and we'll come back to these maps in just a minute.
Thanks, John. So when we map hazard areas, we use provincial standards. For the floodplain, we use a 100-year flood event standard. So that's what we call a 100-year flood. It means it has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. It doesn't mean it happens once every 100 years, which is a common misconception with that term. It means every year there's a 1% chance. And I think living on the Ottawa River, we all are now aware that those can happen close together, just depending on the precipitation events essentially that we receive. And then the 100-year erosion rate standard, again, is a provincial standard, and it's the annual rate of recession extended over 100 years. So essentially that's showing where it is expected based on engineering guidelines that land will recede within 100 years. The thing with erosion, like we said, it could be triggered by different types of events that could occur a little bit over 100 years or a whole bunch at a time. Based on what's going on the landscape. So with both of these hazards, we map them using those provincially mandated standards, and they're consistent across the province of Ontario. They're consistent from municipality to municipality. Next slide. So when you look at the maps, you will notice a bunch of different color lines. When you look at the legend, you're going to see that we have a yellow line that indicates where the flooding hazard is. So this is an area where no development is permitted for obvious reasons. These are areas that will be flooded within that 100-year flood. But then you also see the purple line, which is our regulated area. And that's generally 15 meters from the floodplain. That's the area where even though you're not within the floodplain, there may be different kinds of restrictions or requirements depending on what you're looking to build. So you would need a permit, and there would be different steps or requirements in terms of depending what you'd like to build, if it's a house, if it's a garage, if it's landscaping or a fence or a pool, etc. And then within that, you're also going to see the erosion hazard. And as John mentioned, sometimes the regulated area is more than 15 meters away from the floodplain. That would be an area where there's a particular erosion hazard that is being buffered as well. Next slide. So this is an example. It's not within the Clarence Creek watershed, but it's showing you a blue area, which is the floodplain. It's showing you a purple line, which is the regulated area. And this is the area that you would see on most maps. If you use a la carte, you're only going to see the regulated area. What the regulated area tells you as a landowner or a property owner is that you need to go and see the conservation authority because you're going to need a permit. If it's something very minor, the types of works I'm thinking of would be sort of laying patio stones, placing a small amount of topsoil, for example. Small things, you're going to come and see us. We're going to chat with you about what you're doing. We're going to check on everything, make sure all the lines are correct on your property. And you may not need a permit. For larger things, if you're looking to do construction or a significant amount of fill or alteration on your property, if there's a particular erosion hazard, for example, you may need a permit, and there may be different things, different steps you have to follow, different designs you have to provide. And those are all things to make sure that whatever it is you're doing is going to be safe. It's going to be safe from the 100-year flood, and it's going to be safe from the 100-year erosion rate. If you're within the actual floodplain hazard, there are much more restrictions for obvious reasons, and we'll let you know what those are. We work very closely with the municipality and the building officials as well. So the permissions under the Conservation Authorities Act would also be triggered under the building code. So there's a lot of ways to keep people safe. There's a lot of things we put in place in the zoning to make sure that people are safe, and just to make sure that you come and visit our office and chat with us. We have very friendly regulation staff. We have property inquiry services. If you're a professional, if you're a real estate agent or a lawyer who speculates on property, we have a service we can provide in writing. We can provide site visits, anything you need to kind of make sure that the investment you're making is a correct choice, or whatever you're building or constructing on your property is going to be safe. So our services at our authority are becoming better and better every day. This kind of mapping, which is based on the best available technology, really helps us be able to offer good customer service, and it's something we pride ourselves on. So if you are within the purple line, you're going to have to get to know us and come visit us and chat with us, and we'll make sure that your proposals are going to be protected in the long term. Next slide.
Yeah, we just put the slide up. Obviously, this was done at the request of our participating member municipality, but you're welcome also to contact the United Counties of Prescott Russell if you have specific questions related to zoning or construction as well. often, as Allison mentioned, the first trigger when you go to build or when you go to think about building something new is you go to your municipality for your building permit. And because these sorts of things are mapped, they're included in your official plan, they're included in your zoning schedules, your municipal staff are also going to know, okay, this is in a natural hazard area, you might need to go and speak to South Nation. So if you fail or you forget to come and see us, or if you don't know, I mean, that's fine too. But the good thing about this, like Allison said, everything's streamlined. It's included in a la carte. It's included in our geo portal. If you're interested, it's really easy to figure out, if you might be in an area that's impacted by a natural hazard. But you're also welcome, should you have questions about the project, to contact Louis Prevost, who's the Director of Planning and Forestry at the United Counties of Prescott and Russell. Now we're going to go back to the maps in just a second in case there are some questions and maybe to run through a few scenarios if that makes sense. But we also want to mention that obviously some of the questions that you might have are probably best suited, where we're able to zoom into your property and really take a look at how this might impact you. So we do have a meeting link. It's included in the video description, but it's also here. You're welcome to check out our project webpage where the maps are available as well. But if you have a specific question related to your property or a question on what you might be able to build, or, can I put a garden shed here, or I want to, build a garage there? I mean, those are the sorts of questions we can easily answer and probably best serve for a one-on-one. So we welcome you if you're interested. Click on that link, take a look at our website, fill out the request form. All we're looking for is your contact information and your preferred date when we can chat. And that'll be through a 2-week period between November 16th and the 27th. And like I said at the beginning, we can meet through a variety of ways, but if you have the technology and you want to do so from the comfort of your home, like tonight, you're welcome to set up a meeting request with us, and we can, take a look at your property and see if we can answer any questions that you might have. Now, I think what I'll do now is I'll head back to the big Clarence Creek map, Allison, and I'll see if we have any questions.
I did see one question from Tina asking to zoom in a bit, and there was a link provided. I know people want to take a look at exactly what's on their property. So there is a link in the chat now where you can zoom in on the PDF and maybe get some more detail for your property.
I meant mention while I have this on the screen too, obviously you can see, especially at the bottom of Clarence Creek here, there's a lot of agricultural use as the predominant land use in the area. An important comment here for anyone watching, these sorts of maps, these sorts of regulations, don't necessarily apply to agricultural operations. If you're farming, if you're using the land for agriculture, I mean, these restrictions don't apply. They really are tailored to new development. We want to make sure that, any new or future builds that are going in the area are safe. That doesn't mean, I'm sure you can expect, if you own property in some of these areas, that you might see occasional or seasonal flooding, and that would be normal. But we want to make sure, especially as development continues to occur, and in this area we've seen a lot of it over the last few years, we want to make sure that these new buildings are being built in the right spot and they're being built as safe as possible. But if you're watching from the agricultural sector, rest assured that this doesn't apply to agricultural operations or activities.
And another positive aspect to this kind of mapping is, Rockland is a city that is going to grow. And doing this mapping early allows some of the lands that are identified to expand the urban boundary to be screened ahead of time. So a developer who may own land will be able to know, okay, there's a floodplain area there that I need to be aware of when I go and lay out my design, when I plan my numbers of units. It allows them to make better decisions, as opposed to if a developer wanted to sort of build a new community and make Rockland bigger and better, and they weren't aware of the floodplain, they might have to take on some of that work themselves. So a lot of this kind of planning for natural hazards is about making it easier for the community to grow in areas that are safe. So it's a bit of a best case scenario. And the area around Pilon Creek and Clarence Creek, it's not a very large floodplain. It's fairly contained. So people who own lands in that area, they're probably aware. I mean, I think for most of the property owners, they're going to say, yeah, I've seen water there. I saw water there in 2019. I saw water there in 2017. It's more as we look at the city of Rockland expanding and growing bigger and, bringing more families in, that people buying land to develop these homes are aware of that right off the get-go. They don't have to pay for that information. It's available to them publicly, and it lets them plan ahead early. So I think it's a really positive thing, and it's a really great thing that the counties and the municipalities supported and invested in.
No, I don't see any more questions that weren't addressed in the chat. So we will give a shout out to our team working behind the scenes to answer any of those questions. Of course, if you do submit a meeting request with us, we'll make sure that depending on the nature of your request, we'll get the right person to either meet with you or call you, or if you're just looking for a quick email or you want to check a quick fact, just let us know. Feel free to reach out however you see fit. And if you don't have access to the website or are having trouble with the link, feel free just to give our office a call, 1-877-984-2948, and we'll definitely do our best to help you out. I don't see any more questions, Allison, so I think I'll scroll out to the end of the slide deck and see if a question's dropped while we move through. Of course, to bear in mind that if you receive the draft maps, these are draft, right? So they are subject to review and approval and might change, but the best bet always, it really takes no time or little time at all to reach out to us, to give us a shout, and we can get you this information. And there's also a tab on our website. If you go to nation.owen.ca, on the main page on the right-hand side, there's a little tab that says Online Mapping Tool. You're welcome to click that link once these maps are approved. They also get added to our mapping portal. It's very much like a Google Maps, but for forest, wetland, and natural hazard areas. And you can just click or type in your address right into that geo portal. It'll zoom right to the extent of your property, and you can see if there is any potential hazards in that area. An important note with that too is we do only add the regulation layer, so it's just that purple layer that we saw on the map gives you an idea that there might be hazards present, and it doesn't cost you anything to reach out to us. This information is free, but in reaching out to us, we can tell you, is it erosion? Is it floodplain? Is it a buffer? What sort of restrictions might apply, because it is very, very circumstantial. And of course, our objective here is to help you make good, sound, safe decisions on your property. So I think with that, I don't see any more questions. So, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate everyone who's been able to tune in and watch us tonight. Thanks for welcoming us into your homes. You're welcome to rewatch this video later. It will be uploaded probably in a day or two onto our website, and will be available there while the consultation period is open. And should you have questions, feel free to connect. We'd love to chat with you.